Hello, everybody. Welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. I am your host, Matt Connarton, here on the television edition of the show. I'm chuckling a little bit because for those of you who are watching live, if you happen to see the last few minutes of John Hopwood, or Ward 13 with John Hopwood, I should say, and I told him this too during the changeover. I thought very funny what he said about here in Manchester, Mayor Ted Gatsas. His comments were, I wasn't expecting to hear that. Calling him physically repulsive and all that. That was very funny. So we were laughing about it in the other room, and I'm still chuckling about it. So I mean, not the nicest thing to say, but whatever. I thought it was funny. So I give the great Mr. Hopwood props for that. If you are watching live, of course, we invite you to participate in the show. If you're viewing live, the phone number's on the screen there. And if you don't see a phone number, it's because you're watching a replay or on YouTube or Vimeo. But you're also welcome to participate online. We do have the chat room at IPMNation.com. Actually, if you go to IPMNation.com, MCU Radio, there are links to get into the chat room. Also, links to hit me up on Facebook or on Twitter, which you can do at any time, but if you want to do it during the live show, that's great too. And of course, we do get these up and available on demand on both YouTube and Vimeo, typically by about 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday night. So, lot going on. I've got a lot I want to try to get to. Some of this will be spillover from last night's show, the radio show. We do the radio edition of Unleashed 5 nights a week at 11 p.m. Eastern on IPM Nation. And every Tuesday and Thursday night, we're also carried on the new OTR FM, which is very exciting for us because that really brings us to a not just a national, but a global audience online. So very happy and excited about that. We've had some really interesting guests. Last night, we went international. For the first time that I can remember on the show, I spoke with Lucas Rossi, who's an author from Italy. And that is available online right at IPM Nation if you want to check that out, because we archive all the shows. Monday night, I had a very interesting conversation with author and activist Dr. Mary Ruart from Texas. That was very interesting. Learned some things about the government's relationship with the pharmaceutical industry that I didn't know. So that was really interesting. And we're working on, before the end of the week, we want to get Zach Harrington on, also known as the Right Reverend Honky Z from Godless Liberty. We already had Nicholas Stenkamp on the show from Godless Liberty a few weeks ago, but I want to get Zach on because this coming Saturday, Godless Liberty officially, the live version of the show, officially coming to IPM Nation 1 Saturday nights from 8 to 10 Eastern. And that's a really fun show. For those who haven't heard the show, as the name implies, they are libertarian atheists, hence Godless Liberty. And they're very, very funny. Not for the faint of heart. They really kind of push the envelope with the humor, which I personally like. I mean, I'm sitting in there laughing at John, talking about how physically disgusting our mayor is. So obviously, that's the kind of humor I enjoy. It's that thing when you hear something that you're not expecting to hear, and Godless Liberty is great for that kind of humor, and they're very, very smart guys as well. So this Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, they will be moving officially the live show, to the IPM Nation live station. So very excited about that. And that tone you're hearing is me forgetting to mute my phone before we go on the air. So there you go. Now I am muted. But if you'd like to send me a text during the live show, you can do that. That phone number, of course, is at IPMNation.com/MCU Radio. And again, if you're watching the show live. And of course, you can communicate with us anytime. You just can't call the show anytime, because if I'm not live, you're calling someone else's show, which does happen sometimes here. One other thing, too, for those who are interested, we have a spin-off of this show called Angry Drunk Tales on IPM Nation, and I can hereby officially tell you that the entire series has been updated and uploaded, all 45 episodes, currently available on YouTube. Actually, not entirely true. Episode 5 is missing from YouTube, but the other 44 episodes of Angry Drunk Tales are a spin-off show where we feature the rambling, drunken emails of the individual who hates me the most. Because usually when we get hate mail, if it's really interesting and entertaining, I like to read it to you on the air. But this one individual sends so much hate, and it's so entertaining and interesting to read that we gave him his own show. It's a spinoff. So Angry Drunk Tales, it airs weeknights at midnight on IPM Nation, but we also have all the shows up on YouTube, except for episode 5. YouTube deleted episode 5. They have some kind of an issue with that particular episode. I don't know what it is. Good news is you can still get it because we also upload them all to Vimeo. So they're all there too. If you go to ipmnation.com, and in the upper right, of course, we have links to our YouTube and our Vimeo channels, and you can find them all there. So they're all there. And there will be new episodes of Angry Drunk Tales because even after we finished the season 1, if you will, we continued to get emails from this individual. They've tapered off significantly, but we still have some emails from that individual that I can do dramatic readings on in future episodes of the show. So the show, Angry Drunk Tales, will continue. For how long, I don't know. It depends on how long this person keeps emailing us and harassing us. But we like to have fun with us. At one point, he was threatening some sort of legal action against us, which is funny because in the emails that he sends us, he admits to all kinds of illegal things, including illegally wiretapping us, Jen Coffey and I. The guy who brags about illegally wiretapping us, that's a felony in New Hampshire, then threatens us with legal action because of a show in which we never actually reveal his true identity. It's very, very interesting and funny. So we have a good time. We have a good time around here. All right, let's get into some stuff. A couple quick things, and then I want to get into, and I avoided talking about it on the show initially, but we'll get into the Paris attacks and what happened there. But more so the aftermath of that, and we have this debacle with the refugees, the Syrian refugees wanting to come here, and there's a lot of opposition to that, which I think is very misguided and wrong-headed. We'll get into all that, but a couple quick things first. Let's start with something kind of fun. So, of the current Republican candidates, and by the way, if you didn't bother to notice, Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal has dropped out of the field for the Republican nomination for 2016. Again, if you bothered to notice. What's been kind of interesting is in this current field of candidates, there are candidates who at one point had a lot of excitement around them, a lot of momentum. Bobby Jindal, one of them. I remember in 2012, people were saying, oh, Bobby Jindal should run. He'd probably do great. And then he got around to running this time, couldn't get out of the single digits, and he's already dropping out. Chris Christie, New Jersey governor, there was a lot of pressure on him last time, a lot of encouragement to run in 2012. There's that clip of Ann Coulter famously saying, I think it's from CPAC, where because she wasn't too excited about Romney, she said, we must nominate Chris Christie because if we don't, Romney will be the nominee and we'll lose. And she said that to rousing applause. There was a lot of excitement about Chris Christie, but Chris Christie said, no, he's not running. And now he's, he just got bumped down to he's an opening act on debate night now. He got kicked off the main stage. At least he was in the most recent debate, and he was at the kids' table. So another guy who a lot of excitement, and then nothing. Rand Paul, who I think it was this time last year, he was on the cover of Time magazine. I think it was Time, heralded as the most interesting politician in America, or in the world, however they put it. A lot of interest around him, and he's another guy in single digits. Nobody cares. Who else? I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting. Somewhere in a parallel universe, perhaps Trump isn't running, because it's interesting to wonder who would be the front runner, who would have all this momentum and excitement behind them if Trump weren't in the race, kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I mean, and Ben Carson too, another guy who does very well in the polls. He seems to be number 2 behind Trump in most polls, and I don't get it. I mean, I kind of do, but. So, it's kind of an interesting thing to wonder about. But Bobby Jindal out. Maybe if enough people drop out, maybe if Pataki gets out, because nobody cares about him. He really missed his window, former New York governor. Maybe we can stop having two debates, and it can just be, at some point, one would think, right, there will be Republican debates where it's everybody on one stage because, by attrition, enough people will have left the race that you can have a debate with everybody without having, 15 people on the stage at once. So he's out. Now, I have said, and I don't support any of these people. I endorsed on the show Darrell W. Perry, Libertarian, running for president. Of course, he has to win the Libertarian nomination first at the convention. He was on the show recently, by the way, another great guest who we had on the radio edition of Unleashed. And again, you can find that at IPM Nation. Listen to it on demand. Download it if you'd like. Keep it forever and ever. Or you can just stream it. You don't have to download it. We give you options. But so I'm supporting Darrell W. Perry. But I have said many times, of the current crop of Republicans running, I personally find Ohio Governor John Kasich the least repulsive. So if, gun to my head, if I had to pick one of these awful people, I would choose him. He doesn't, when he talks about a tax plan, for example, he doesn't give you a lot of pie in the sky. He actually has some semblance of realism about him. And I thought he had a great moment in the most recent debate when, Trump was doing his whole, we're going to deport 11 million people and we're going to build a wall. And Kasich kind of said to him, well, this deporting 11 million people stuff is fantasy stuff, and we need to have an adult conversation about it. This is not a realistic adult conversation, which I thought was a great moment for him, because he's right. So he's kind of a realist. He doesn't promise you a bunch of stuff. Sometimes Republicans will criticize Democrats for, at these debates, it's all about who can promise you the most free stuff, right? But really, both parties do it. The Democrats are absolutely guilty of that. They're going to promise you free college and free this and free that. And none of it's actually free because we pay for it with our taxes. But Republicans pull the same crap. They just do it in a little bit different way. They promise you these ridiculous pie-in-the-sky tax plans where somehow everybody's happy, except maybe in Trump's plan. He's said that hedge fund managers won't be very happy with him, but everyone else is going to be happy, and we're going to have this prosperous economy, and we're going to have no deficit and a balanced budget, and we're going to pay down the debt, and everything's going to be great. And, of course, the numbers never add up. And if you confront them with the fact that the numbers don't add up, they say, oh, sure they do. Go back and look at it again or something. But Kasich seems to try to avoid doing that and actually has some semblance of realism about what he presents. I loved in the first debate, I loved Kasich's answer on gay marriage. He said, look, I as a Catholic, I personally oppose gay marriage because it violates my faith, but this is now settled law by the Supreme Court, so we need to move on. And he even said he recently attended a gay marriage and had a nice time, so good for him. Actually, in the current century on that issue. So there are things about John Kasich that I like. And then I see this on HuffPost last night. John Kasich calls for new agency to promote Judeo-Christian values to the world. Two obvious problems with this. Number one, we have more than just Christians in this country, and we have something called freedom of religion. This is why some people get so upset when you use phrases like Christian nation and things like that. But the other problem, perhaps less obvious to some, is you've got a Republican saying, I want to have a new government agency. Well, I thought Republicans want to shrink government, not expand it. Now, the truth of the matter is Republicans love government almost as much as Democrats do. They try to present themselves as a party of small government. Democrats are the party of big government. Republicans are the party of small government. Well, I think we need to reset the paradigm. There is some truth there. Yes, Democrats are the party of big government. They love big government. Republicans, I would argue, are the party of medium government. Libertarians clearly are the party of small government. Republicans are the party of medium government. They do really like government. Don't be fooled. They like government when it suits their purposes. They like government when government tells you what you can and can't do in terms of your reproductive choices. They love government when government gets to tell you who you can or cannot marry. There are a variety of ways in which Republicans, while they will tell you all day long how much they hate government, they really kind of like government. They don't like it as much as Democrats, but they still like it. They still find uses and purposes for it. And one of the things they talk about in these debates is how they want to eliminate the Department of Education. They want to eliminate the EPA. They want to eliminate all these agencies so we can shrink down government. And then John Kasich says, hey, guess what, guys? I want to actually do the opposite and create a new agency, a new government agency. Now, maybe in his mind, he thinks he has cover because he wants this new agency to shove Christianity in everyone's face around the world. Because that'll work. We're really bad at exporting democracy. You can't get people to democratize at the point of a gun. We'll continue to try regardless, but maybe we can export Christianity. Good luck. But, he wants to expand government to do this, creating another government agency. He is what a term that I first heard Joe Scarborough use. Joe Scarborough, of course, himself a Republican, but he wrote an entire book about the Bush administration, calling Bush 43, called Rome Wasn't Burnt in a Day, talking about the Bush administration's big government conservatism. The administration that gave us Medicare Part D, Medicare or Medicaid. I always get that confused, but so they expanded government. Today we have a lot of Republican governors around the country who want to expand the welfare program by drug testing everybody. That adds additional bureaucracy to the program. See, they love government when it suits their purposes. And this just is bizarre. I'll read this. It's very short, and then we'll move on. Republican presidential candidate John Kasich said he'd set up an agency with a mandate to promote what he calls Judeo-Christian values overseas to counter Islamic propaganda. The Ohio governor says, so it'd be part of the war on terror. Oh, well, that makes it okay. The Ohio governor says he would create the new agency to promote the values of human rights, democracy, and freedoms of speech, religion, and association. Kasich says information would be distributed in the Middle East, China, Iran, and Russia to compete with the propaganda and misinformation purveyed by Islamic militants. He made the comments Tuesday at the National Press Club in Washington as part of a speech on national security. Kasich said the U.S., quote, is failing to advance our values in the battle of ideas, unquote, in the face of advances by the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. The agency's, quote, job would fundamentally be to revive what we used to do when we beamed messages into the former Soviet Union, unquote, he told NBC News in a subsequent interview. Quote, we need to beam messages around the world about what it means to have a Western ethic, to be part of Judeo-Christian society. It means freedom. It means opportunity. It means respect for women. It means freedom to gather. It means so many things, unquote. Yes, we must transmit. We must beam that message to all those whom we threaten with bombs and guns if they don't do what we want. We must tell them about liberty and freedom and peace and all these wonderful things, and how we're the great melting pot, America, the great melting pot, as we're saying no to all these refugees who want to come to our country. As we talk about deporting 11 million people and building walls, let's make sure that everyone hears our message of freedom. Great. Just bizarre, a government agency to do that. Hey, if you really want to beam these messages in other countries, how about maybe find someone to start a show on shortwave radio? Shortwave radio, you can transmit it around the world or something. Or I don't know. Give some company with an orbiting satellite a tax break if they'll beam some sort of show. You could, and they beam this show in other countries. You could call the show, I don't know, please like us or we'll bomb you or something like that. Not literally, but I'm sure they'd come up with a slightly different title. I'm being sarcastic. But just a bizarre thing to say. I still, don't get me wrong, I still continue to find John Kasich the least repulsive of the current field. Another thing, and then we'll get to all the serious stuff, I promise, but this went up today on Reuters. Home abortions rise after Texas law closes clinics. I've been saying for years, I am pro-choice. I'm not pro-choice because I think abortion is a great thing and I'm some sort of sociopathic, amoral baby murderer. I know a lot of pro-lifers like to paint that caricature of those who are pro-choice. To be fair, a lot of pro-choicers also paint an unfair caricature of pro-lifers, presenting them as all being just a bunch of religious fanatics who want to control everyone's reproductive choices and whatnot, and that's also not entirely fair. There are some like that, but not everyone has that point of view. That's one of the problems with the abortion issue in this country with discussing it is both sides, both pro-lifers and pro-choicers, will caricature what the other side thinks and professes, and they end up talking past each other. You see that on all kinds of issues, but I think abortion is the most glaring example of it. I'm not pro-choice because I think killing babies is great and all that. I'm pro-choice because, to be honest with you, I don't like abortion either. I think it's a bad option unless absolutely necessary. But I also know that, look, if you could wave a magic wand and overturn Roe v. Wade tomorrow and outlaw abortion, not that it's an oversimplification. Overturning Roe v. Wade in and of itself would not instantly outlaw abortion. But if you could somehow, immediately, outlaw abortion nationally, no more abortion, what would happen? We would see a return to, you hear the phrase back alley abortions and, women perforating their uteruses with coat hangers. I'm sorry to be graphic, but that's one of the ways it used to work. And apparently it's working that way now again in Texas. This is what happens. The rate of abortion in this country has been on, pro-lifers don't like to hear this, but it's been on a steady decline year after year in the decades since Roe v. Wade by making birth control more available and sex ed in schools, having that so that kids understand what happens if you make a poor choice, the potential risks. The rate of abortion and the rate of teen pregnancy in this country have both been on a steady decline nationally. That is a fact. Texas, I remember when Rick Perry ran for president in 2012, he was very proud of his abstinence-only education policy in Texas. We only teach our kids abstinence, not sex ed. We teach them don't do that. And at the same time, Texas had, at that time, I don't know if they still do, probably, the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country. So obviously what they do in Texas doesn't work the way they intend it. So now I read this. Home abortions rise after Texas law closes clinics. Oh, well, here, give me that box of crayons and color me surprised. A Texas law, again, this is from Reuters, a Texas law aimed at restricting abortions, which took effect in 2013, has led to more women trying to end a pregnancy on their own, while the number of clinical procedures in the state has declined, according to a study released on Tuesday. The study showed that poor women bear the brunt of the law. The Texas Policy Evaluation Project found that, quote, poverty, limited resources, and local facility closures limited women's ability to obtain abortion care in a clinic setting that were key factors in deciding to attempt abortion self-induction, unquote. The study estimated that between 100,000 and 240,000 women aged 18 to 49 in Texas, oh my God, those are big numbers, have tried to self-induce abortion since the law went into effect, using methods such as herbs, teas, and medications obtained in Mexico without prescription. Researchers from the University of Texas Population Research Center, IBIS Reproductive Health, the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and the University of California at San Francisco conducted the study. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed this month to hear a challenge by abortion providers to portions of the Republican-backed law that they contend are aimed at shutting clinics that offer the procedure. Quote, this important new research paints an alarming picture of what the future may be like for women across the country if the Supreme Court does not block this cruel law, unquote. Cecile Richards, president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, said in a statement on Tuesday. Amy Hagstrom Miller, chief executive of Whole Women's Health, the lead plaintiff in the challenge that was accepted by the Supreme Court, said in a statement on Tuesday, quote, by forcing clinics to close, Texas legislators have multiplied the barriers women face when they need an abortion, which was the idea. Texas women are forced to go to multiple and unnecessary visits at clinics that are now farther away, take days off of work, losing income, find childcare, and arrange and pay for transportation for hundreds of miles, unquote. When the Supreme Court made its announcement on November 13th, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said, quote, the common sense measures Texas has put in place elevate the standard of care and protect the health of Texas women. The state has wide discretion to pass laws ensuring Texas women are not subject to substandard conditions at abortion facilities. The advancement of the abortion industry's bottom line shouldn't take precedent over women's health, and we look forward to demonstrating the validity of these important health and safety requirements in court, unquote. Oh, good. I'm sure the women of Texas are just so happy that the government is looking out for their well-being and best interests. Yes, I'm sure they're very grateful. I'm sure that woman sticking a coat hanger in her uterus is just so grateful to you, Texas, for just really being on top of this and ensuring women's health. And great job. Paxton's office was not available to comment on the study. And I'm sure if they did comment on the study, they would say, well, this is obviously a bunch of liberals who conducted this study, and it's wrong, and you can't believe this. And because that's what these people say whenever they're confronted with, facts and data. One provision of the law requires doctors performing abortions to have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of a clinic. Proponents have said this protects women by providing continuity of care, but abortion providers and medical experts have said it has almost no public health value. The number, by the way, and there's only a little bit more to this article and we'll move on, but it's always interesting to me when conservatives use the argument about we need to do this to protect you, protect your health. We need to help you make these decisions by limiting your options. But conservatives oppose big government, nanny state government. They don't like the government in your life making decisions for you. See, there's a pretty obvious, those two concepts are diametrically opposed, right? Oh, we hate big government. We don't want big government in your life. Oh, but we need big government to help make these decisions for you, to protect you. See, again, the Republican Party is not the party of small government. They are the party of medium government. They like government when it supports their agenda. The number of abortions in Texas declined by 13% in the 6 months after the main sections of the new law took effect. Compared with the same period a year earlier, the study showed. It found that wait time to schedule an abortion was now about 3 weeks, putting abortions out of reach for some women, while clinic closures have put constraints on women who may not have resources to travel hundreds of miles to a clinic. Planned Parenthood of Texas and the Whole Women's Health have said that before the law, Texas had 42 clinics that provided abortions. It now has 19. All right, so there you go, Texas. Great job. Let's move on, shall we? Because speaking of people doing a great job, we got all kinds of people just handling the aftermath of the Paris attacks just oh so well, aren't they? I am of the opinion that this is what Ron Paul, of course, calls blowback, what happened in Paris and all of this stuff that goes on in the Middle East. We have, historically, we have I don't know if tradition is the right word, but, Rand Paul said it, I thought, very well in the last Republican debate. He said, part of the way to avoid this kind of thing is to stop arming our enemies, which is what we do. Sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose, because in the case In cases where we do it on purpose, it's because at that particular moment, we're arming our allies who then later become our enemies. One example is we armed ISIS. We not only created ISIS by destabilizing the region, by going into Iraq and disbanding the Iraqi army, who now many of them are ISIS. Clearly, the George W. Bush administration created ISIS. Anyone who tells you differently is just not being intellectually honest, okay, number one. So Jeb Bush, because he has to stick up for his brother, is not being intellectually honest with you when he says my brother kept us safe. He didn't keep us safe. First of all, 9/11 happened on his watch, and second of all, he created ISIS. I'm not saying he did it on purpose. I'm not saying he's not. You got to keep that military-industrial complex going because war is our greatest export, right? People say we don't make anything anymore in this country. Well, we make war. So, you know, all of this stuff, I think, would probably stop if we would get out of the Middle East. Now, we'll never get out of the Middle East because the United States population has been brainwashed into thinking that we can somehow, again, force people to democratize at the point of a gun, the threat of violence, but also we think we can convert them to Christianity or something, I guess. I don't really know. But we're trapped in an endless cycle. Part of it is our policies, obviously. We just constantly inflame everything and make it worse over there. But also part of it is the American public has been brainwashed into thinking that if we don't continue to fight, if we don't remain in this no-win situation, we'll never see the end of this in our lifetimes, this fight against, you know, Islamic jihadism. You know, if we, let me put it this way, and I said this Monday night to my guest, Dr. Mary Ruart, on the show. We were discussing this on the radio edition, and she was much more optimistic than I am. If Barack Obama tomorrow gave a press conference, he said he was going to make a major foreign policy address to the nation, and he said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually pull back. We're going to actually stop making war in the Middle East. And let them do what they want. Let them do their own thing until they directly threaten the United States by attacking us on our homeland or attacking one of our NATO allies. We'll throw that caveat in there. We're not going to continue to engage these people, which I think would be the correct thing to do. He can't do that, however, because if he did that, one thing that certainly would happen is you would have every Republican in the country pointing at him and yelling, see, we told you, he really is a secretly Kenyan-born Muslim terrorist. He wants to give in. He's surrendering to the terrorists. See? That's what would happen. And even a lot of people who support Obama would be going, wait a minute, oh, we're just gonna surrender and go home? We can't do that. We're the United States of America. We're the world's last remaining superpower. We gotta stay there and fight. Because somehow, some way we can win this fight. So I'm not optimistic that this will ever change. I think the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned about this, and he was right. I think they've successfully brainwashed the American population into believing that we just got to fight, 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 war, war, war. I mean, there's not even any difference at this point between Republicans and Democrats on this. If you listen to what Republicans say, during the Republican debates, and you listen to what Hillary and even Bernie, who, you know, he's supposed to be this great liberal, but what they say during the Democrat debates, it's all just a lot of war. We got more war. That's the answer to everything, is more war, more fighting, more tanks and bombs and guns, and we'll get there eventually. And they know we won't. The only thing we can or should do, in my view, is we have to have a much lighter footprint in the Middle East. Now, again, I'm not suggesting, as some would say, some would suggest something even more severe. Some of my libertarian friends would say we need to leave everybody on their own. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't walk away from our treaties. You know, if a nation state directly attacks NATO, we need to respond, in my view. So I'm not an isolationist. I don't want to be misunderstood here, but I would like to maybe learn from history and inject some common sense into what we do in terms of foreign policy. And that's not an option. And I believe that's not an option by design, because you can't continue to fuel the military-industrial complex, our greatest export, if you begin to inject common sense and logic into some of this. So we will continue to make more war. And we will continue to play directly into what ISIS wants. There's an opinion piece that went up on HuffPost. It's short, but I think it really kind of sums it up really well. This was written by Daniel Marins. This one up last night. The West has given ISIS exactly what it wants. Unfortunately, conservatives in the U.S. and Europe seem to want to do all the wrong things. And this is what it says. Lawmakers on both sides of the Atlantic have responded to Friday's terror attacks in Paris by calling to close their country's doors to Syrian refugees and framing the fight against the Islamic State group, which claimed responsibility for the attacks, as a clash of civilizations. But shutting out refugees and creating a hostile environment for Western Muslims won't help Europe and the U.S. defeat the extremists who wrought terror in Paris. In fact, such a strategy is likely to make the U.S. and its allies more vulnerable, not safer. Here are 3 approaches policymakers have embraced since Friday's attacks that would actually play into the hands of the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. By the way, as I read these to you, keep in mind, we've all heard the phrase, oh, the terrorists have already won, right? Well, they have. In Paris, I don't know if we'll get to this, but in Paris, I have a story from Truth and Media, our friends at Truth and Media. Guess what they're doing in response to this? They're taking away civil liberties from the citizens. Sound familiar? That's what's going on in Paris right now. They're restricting everyone's civil liberties or I should say that's what's happening in France, across the country there, in response to what happened in Paris. Yep. Once again, the terrorists have already won. We buckle, we give in so easily. Okay. Anyway, back to the article. All right, so here are 3 things that are being done or we're in the process of trying to do that are bad ideas. Number 1, contribute to radicalization by keeping the refugees out. The 26 U.S. governors who are calling on the federal government to reject Syrian refugees have cited concerns about a refugee committing a terror attack. Authorities found the passport of a man who crossed into Europe as a refugee from Syria near the body of one of the Paris suicide bombers, though it is not at all clear that the bomber was in fact a refugee. But even if one Syrian refugee did participate in the attacks, shutting out additional Syrians makes it more likely that extremism will take hold among them. Again, we fan the flame by being intolerant and hateful and xenophobic, because there's a lot of that in this country and it's toxic and we poison ourselves with it, but whatever. You know, between treating refugees this way and wanting to kick out 11 million people and build a wall, you know, we are very xenophobic people, aren't we? And we just, it really does make things worse, not better. Trust me. Josh Hampson argues in The Hill that keeping Syrian refugees in Middle East countries where they are currently concentrated increases the probability that they will grow susceptible to radicalization. Yeah, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That's where the radicalization is happening. That's where it's concentrated. These people want to leave there. We tell them no, they have to stay there, where the radicalization is happening. And we tell them no, we don't want you because we don't trust you. But hopefully you'll like us anyway and not turn against us and want to attack us, right? You know what we need to do? I have a great idea. We need a federal agency that can beam messages into where these Syrians are being radicalized that tells them how great America is and why they should love us. I think somebody else suggested that recently. I'm kidding, of course. It's a stupid idea. Let's see. Hampson cites a 2013 study on the links between refugee resettlement and extremism, which found that the 2 greatest indicators of whether resettled refugees will commit acts of terror are poor living conditions and a lack of hospitable treatment in their host countries. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees found that, quote, the loss of hope and appalling living conditions, unquote, are motivating Syrian refugees to leave Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt for Europe. It's easy to see, then, why shutting refugees out of the West could breed more extremism. Hampson says it's urgent that the West enable Syrian refugees to resettle in places where they will be less vulnerable to radicalization. It really just makes sense. Why else would someone, when you think about how these people get radicalized, They're in hopeless situations. Why else would someone be, for example, a suicide bomber? If you're going to take yourself out in the process of taking out others, obviously you believe that there is nothing else left for you in this life and you have no hope. So, screw it. I'll blow myself up and take the rest of them with me. Number 2, play into the Islamic State's narrative by alienating Western Muslims. Characterizing the fight with the IS as a clash of civilizations strengthens the group in another key way. That's exactly the framing the group depends on. One of the goals of attacks like the one in Paris is to provoke an overreaction that will make some Muslims in the West feel that Islam is inherently irreconcilable with the culture of the countries they live in. Quote, this kind of nativism is used to show that the West does not uphold its own standards, that it favors its own type, unquote, said Christopher Swift, a national security expert at Georgetown and author of the forthcoming book, The Fighting Vanguard, Local Insurgencies and the Global Jihad. Quote, it reinforces the clash of civilizations narrative that groups like ISIS use to make a political reapproachment between different religious groups impossible, unquote. At least 6 of the Paris attackers identified by the French government were European nationals. There's a little more to that, but I want to make sure we have time for everything, so we'll get to number 3. Number 3, give up a crucial natural advantage over the militants. The Islamic State has been very disappointed by the flow of refugees to Europe because it undermines the narrative that the group provides a safe haven for global Muslims. In this way, the efforts by some European nations to accommodate Syrian refugees have helped to bridge some of the perceived divide between the West and the Muslim world that Swift describes. Quote, the reality is the Islamic State loathes the individuals are fleeing Syria for Europe, wrote Aaron Zellin, an expert on jihadist groups. Quote, it undermines IS's message that its self-styled caliphate is a refuge because if it was, individuals would actually go there in droves since it's so close instead of risking their lives through arduous journeys that could lead to death en route to Europe, unquote. Zellin goes on to cite a dozen statements from Islamic State leaders warning refugees against heading to Europe or other infidel lands. Conversely, if Europe and the U.S. were to shut out Syrian refugees, they would be foregoing an advantage that they have over the Islamic State group. So I think that was a really well-written opinion piece on HuffPost that kind of sums up the problems with this, wanting to shut these people out. You have, I think all the Republican candidates are saying, yes, we need to keep them out. It really, again, I talked about this a little bit too on the radio show last night. This xenophobia in the country, which I think is becoming more pervasive, and it's so toxic, and it drives us to do things that ultimately are against our own interests, like keeping out the refugees. I mentioned France earlier and what's going on there. Let me read you that article quickly. This went up today. Again, this is from our friends at Truth and Media. France moves to strip citizens of civil liberties after Paris attacks. Rachel Stoltzfus writes this. French President Francois Hollande proposed constitutional amendments and a three-month extension of state of emergency measures Monday that will severely limit the civil liberties of French citizens. By the way, often, state of emergency is code for martial law. After a series of coordinated terrorist attacks left 129 dead in Paris Friday, Hollande immediately declared a state of emergency based on a rarely used 1955 law that allows the state to conduct warrantless searches of private property, impose curfews, restrict public gatherings and movements of people, confiscate weapons at will, and take over the press. By law, the state of emergency cannot last more than 12 days, but Hollande asked for a 3-month extension Monday. Let me stop here for a moment. This should sound familiar to everybody. Anybody who's ever even heard of the Patriot Act sees a parallel here. And it's very interesting to see so many of the people who would scream and yell about how the Patriot Act was unconstitutional and whatnot, but then we'll look at this and say, well, clearly France is doing the right thing. This is what you have to do. And if the same thing had happened here, God forbid, again, we'll be right back to that. All these people screaming about the Patriot Act, and how evil it is, many of them, not all of them certainly, but a lot of them will be going, oh, we need a new Patriot Act. It's people just react emotionally in the moment. They don't think about the larger effect that it has long term, and how, as usual, the terrorists win because we play into their hands. Hollande also proposed a series of constitutional amendments to increase the state's surveillance powers and give it power to strip convicted terrorists and binationals who commit hostile acts toward France of citizenship. Hollande said the amendments are necessary so the state doesn't have to resort to the state of emergency to deal with terror threats. Quote, we must change our constitution to act against terrorism, unquote. The proposed amendments will also give the state more sophisticated methods to crack down on weapons trafficking, a quicker way to deport foreigners considered a threat, and the ability to bar binationals considered a terror risk from entering the country. French conducted 168 raids Sunday night, turning up cash, bulletproof vests, various types of guns, and a rocket launcher, reported the Wall Street Journal. Police put 104 people on house arrest and detained 23 others. Hollande has promised a merciless fight against ISIS in response to the attack. French fighter jets dropped 20 bombs on the group's de facto Syrian capital of Raqqa Sunday night, destroying a command center and training camp. Well, that's just going to inflame everything, isn't it? Look, I want to be clear. I'm not an isolationist. I'm not a pacifist. And I have no sympathy for ISIS. I do have sympathy, of course, because as always happens, there will be collateral damage. There will be people who aren't guilty of anything who end up dead. But don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm not sympathetic to the bad guys here. I want to be very clear on that. And ISIS, they are bad guys. And when I talk about us inflaming the situation, again, I want to be very clear. That in no way condones what these people do. I don't think violence is ever the answer. And trust me, I will shed no tears. If somehow somebody figured out a way to kill all of the IS militants without harming any civilians or just making things worse for ourselves, if there was some sort of magical way to do that, I would be all for it. I'm not a pacifist. I like it when bad people get killed. I like it when terrorists end up dead. I just wish that there was a way to do it without just inflaming things for ourselves and continuing to dig us into exactly what the military-industrial complex depends on us continuing to be dug in. It's a business. War profiteering is a business. Part of the argument, and this is the argument, again, I heard John Kasich on a radio show last night making this argument about the screenings. We can't, and Ben Carson said this too, and I think this is the position of all the Republicans who are running, and probably Republicans in general. We cannot let anyone in until we figure out a way to screen them. The problem with that argument is, of course, that process already exists. The ACLU issued a statement today talking about how detailed, it's a multi-layered process, a process of screening these people before they come to the United States. It already exists. Elise Foley posted this. She's the immigration and politics reporter for HuffPost. Refugee screenings are more intensive than some politicians would have you think. The Obama administration is pushing back on claims that it doesn't vet refugees. I'm actually not going to read this because we're going to run out of time. But this is online. You can find it. There's already a process in place. And again, it is multi-layered. It is very detailed, very thorough. We already screen refugees coming into the U.S. But Republicans are, again, they're using hate and xenophobia and fear-mongering to make their case so that you will vote for them because, after all, that works. That seems to mobilize conservatives. They like that kind of stuff, and they gravitate toward it. It comes across as tough and all that stuff. An exception, a notable exception, a guy who, historically, this particular individual I criticize quite a bit because he's one of the biggest war hawks I've ever seen. And yet, every once in a while, this guy will do something where I feel compelled to praise him on the show because he'll, in spite of all the evil things that he votes for and all that, he just, every once in a while, he just impresses me. John McCain. According to Reuters, John McCain on refugees said, quote, all children are God's children. He strongly disagrees with Republicans' calls to ban Muslim refugees but accept Christians. Let me read this. Senator John McCain, one of the Senate's biggest defense hawks, on Tuesday rejected calls by some Republicans that the U.S. accept only Christian refugees fleeing Syria, not Muslims. McCain said, quote, my faith is that all children are God's children, unquote. Some Republicans have argued the U.S. should accept Syrian refugees, but only if they are Christian. Well, we are a Christian nation, after all. Everybody else doesn't count. Presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz, of course, said he plans to reintroduce legislation barring Muslim refugees in the wake of last week's Paris terrorist attacks, but exempting Christians. Because they're all the same, right? That attitude, by the way, of course, it's not just xenophobia. That's really just outright bigotry. To say that they're all the same. McCain said he doesn't think all refugees should be kept out of the U.S. And there's more to this if you want to read it, but I'm glad to see McCain said what he said. Also, listen to this, though. A Tennessee lawmaker said he wants to round up all recent Syrian refugees in the state. So there's this Republican in Tennessee, a top Republican leader, who he says not only should we not allow them in, we got to round up the people who are here. And I shared this article on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page, and I said, anybody who knows anything about history should be immediately creeped out when they hear anybody talking about rounding people up. You know what I mean? There are examples of rounding people up throughout history, and they're not good. Let me read this. A top Republican leader in Tennessee not only doesn't want Syrian refugees coming to his state, but he also wants to round up and kick out all recent refugees from the war-torn country. He said, quote, I'm not worried about the bureaucrat in D.C. or what the unelected judge thinks. We need to gather Syrian refugees up and politely take them back to ICE, the Federal Immigration Center, and say, they're not coming to Tennessee, they're yours, unquote. Tennessee State House GOP caucus chairman Glenn Casada told the Tennessean on Tuesday. More than half of the nation's governors have called on the United States to stop admitting Syrian refugees in the wake of the Paris attacks, with most of them promising to do everything in their power to prevent them from entering their states. Legal scholars agree that it would be unconstitutional for governors to take such a course of action, but Quesada says he still thinks the states should try. And there's more to what he said. Listen to this. Quote, we need to activate the Tennessee National Guard and stop them from coming into the state by whatever means we can. Tennessee is a sovereign state. If the federal government is forsaking the obligation to protect our citizens, we need to act, unquote. During World War II, the government also rounded up a group of people, Japanese Americans, but it sent them to internment camps rather than kicking them out of the country. They too had done nothing wrong, but were instead victims of nativist hysteria. The internment is widely viewed as one of America's most shameful acts. Tennessee State Senate Majority Leader Mark Norris, a Republican, told the Tennessean that he did not think it would be appropriate to round up recent Syrian refugees, although he didn't elaborate. Well, good for him. This is the kind of crazy stuff that's out there, and they prey on that, the fear-mongering. And like I said before, you know, I just think that it's really unfortunate that this stuff tends to be so effective and people just buy into it so easily. And if you're a Republican candidate for president, I said this Monday night on the show. I made a prediction, and my Republican friends aren't going to like this, but this is my prediction. I do believe at this moment, as I said Monday night, and this can certainly change. A lot can happen between now and the election. We haven't even hit the primary season yet. But my prediction is this, and I'm not a betting man, but if I were a betting man, I would put money on this. I do firmly believe that Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States, because the Republican Party, in terms of winning back the White House in 2016, will lose, not because Hillary will defeat whoever the Republican nominee is, but because they've already beaten themselves. After the 2012 elections, and I've talked about this many times on the show, but just very quickly, the postmortem on 2012 and Romney losing, when he could have won, was that all these Republican strategists and Republicans reflecting on that said, we need to find a way to reach out to Hispanics and stop making them feel like they're not welcome here and whatnot. And that needs to be the new strategy. Hispanics, fastest growing demographic in the U.S. I saw one study says by the year 2040, whites will be the minority, Hispanics will be the majority. Personally, I don't care. I think people are people, whatever. But a lot of people are just horrified by that. But so we need to find a way to reach out to Hispanics. That lasted for a couple of months. And then shortly after that, Republicans everywhere are back to, we need to send everybody home and we need to build a big wall. And that continues. When you combine that with this anti-refugee thing where we're painting all Muslims as being terrorists, that's the inference here, right? There's no way the Republican Party can win the White House in 2016. Yes, a lot of this anti-immigrant stuff and anti-refugee stuff, it's great for mobilizing the base. Whoever does that the most, and so far it's Trump, whoever can do that the most will win the Republican nomination. But you can't win the general election with that stuff, especially the Hispanic part of it. You can't win the White House, as we found out in 2012, without the Hispanic vote. And even fewer, at this point, Hispanics are going to vote for Republicans in 2016 than they did in 2012, with the kind of rhetoric we're hearing now. It's just not going to work, and there needs to be a massive course correction on the right. So, and there's not going to be anytime soon. So they will continue to bring the hate to win the nomination, and I don't know how you reel that in for the general election. The truth is you don't. Hillary Clinton will be the next president. And again, just to be clear, I'm not a Hillary supporter. I've endorsed the Libertarian, well, he hasn't won the nomination yet, but one of the Libertarian candidates, Darrell W. Perry. But Hillary Clinton will be the next president. I truly believe that. I know it's extremely early to be making that kind of prediction, but I think I'm right. That's it. We're out of time. Don't forget, of course, we do make the television edition available on Vimeo and on YouTube, typically by 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. And, of course, don't forget the radio edition of Unleashed, Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern on IPM Nation. And Tuesdays and Thursday nights, we're also carried on OTR FM, which is very exciting stuff. If you're watching live on Wednesday, I will be back at 6 p.m. with the Honorable Gary S. Hopper for Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. And that's it. I'll talk at you all later. Thanks, everybody.